Good afternoon and welcome to the Walsh College webinar. You're joining us today for Career Obsolescence, Don't Do It. And this is being hosted to you by Walsh College. And you'll be hearing from our presenter, Dr. Lee Meadows, the Professor of Management. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to offer a few reminders and announcements for all of today's attendees. First, all participants will be in listen-only mode during the duration of today's webinar. So if you cannot hear the sound of my voice, or if you're having any audio or technical difficulties, rather, please do let us know by using the chat panel, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll also notice that throughout today's webinar that we'll be asking some polling questions, and if you haven't had a chance to take that first poll to participate in that, we ask you to do that at this time. And the first poll is just asking generally, how did you hear about today's webinar? So you should be seeing that on the right-hand side of your screen. As we go throughout today's webinar, we'll have some additional polls, and it'll just help to gauge your level of interest in some of the different subject areas that we will be covering off today. So again, the polls will be running along throughout today's webinar, and we will have an opportunity for Q&A, and that will be about the last 5 to 10 minutes of today's webinar as well. So what I'm going to do now is actually we'd like to know who's on the session with us today. So what I'm going to do is open up our second poll, and we would just like to ask the question, what is your affiliation with Walsh College? I know that there are several of you on the session today who may be students or alumni. We know that this webinar is reaching far and wide, so some of you might be recruiters and kind of in that industry, either working through different issues regarding career branding, and that might be why you're joining us. Perhaps you're looking into Walsh in the future. You may be a faculty or a staff member here at the college, and it might be none of the above. You're just interested in the topic of career development, and we certainly open these webinars up wide to the community, so we'd love to hear from you. So it looks like just about all of our participants have responded to that polling question. I'm going to go ahead and just share those responses off with the audience here. And it looks like we've got a good group of students and alumni that are on the session today. So welcome on behalf of all of us here at Walsh College, and we're so pleased that you're joining us for today's topic. So what I'd like to do now is turn the webinar over to our presenter, Dr. Lee Meadows, Professor of Management at Walsh College. And I'm sure that several of you have had Dr. Meadows during your time here as a student. And perhaps a few of you as an alumni remember Dr. Meadows from some of your classes, or perhaps you've attended some of the other webinars or workshops that he's offered, and he is definitely a fan favorite here at Walsh. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the microphone over to Dr. Meadows, and I'll let him take it from here.
Let me say good afternoon to everyone. It's always a delight to have you all with us when we're doing these webinars. It's a lot of fun. We always like to feel like we're sharing some good information that's helpful to you as you pursue your career goals. And we enjoy the fact that you like spending time with us. So without further ado, we'll spend some time talking. We'll go ahead and get started. And here's what we're looking at doing today. For the next hour, I want to spend some time talking about what is career obsolescence. Now, those of us around here at Walsh, we know that sometimes this can be a fearful topic because it suggests maybe an ending, or suggests that individuals may not be keeping up with something, or that there's something else going on in the universe. We just want to explore that with you as a way of raising some self-awareness. And with that, we'll talk about how to identify the symptoms of career obsolescence. And it doesn't really take line number or somebody's reading tea leaves for you. They don't require a particular degree in clinical psychology, but just paying attention to things that are going on around you. We're also going to talk about how you use strategies where you move from obsolescence to opportunity. Because the environment is not working now. This notion of becoming, while it's easy to make technology obsolete real quick, it's also very easy for us to lose sight of the skills that we had to advance forward. In some ways, it's almost like having a dial-up set of skills in the digital world. But there are opportunities that will help to ease that transition from obsolescence into the next step. And we're going to talk about the steps that are necessary to change your career descent into one of asset. And that's one way of looking at, one way of thinking about opportunities. So with that, we'll roll. Let's start with just the basics. The question of what makes up your career is a critical question because there are any number of elements that contribute to how successful one is in a career. And if you look at the things we have listed up here, the things that we begin to accumulate that make us who we are on a career path. Of course, it's the knowledge that we acquire along the way. and our particular passion for a career. A lot of us get on a career path because there's something that compels us to be there. And then others, we kind of fell into the path and we learned the passion as we went along. Your experiences count in terms of how it adds knowledge to what you do and adds to your skill base. And there are life moments that in many ways can transcend what's going on in one aspect of your career and move you into something altogether different. And sometimes it's important to reflect on those life moments. We do accumulate a number of different skills as we go along, and it's the whole skill area that in many ways serves as the foundation for what could be perceived as career obsolescence, and one way of thinking about how we move from that. The relationships that we've built along the way, not just within the organizations that you work, but outside of the organizations, the networks that the people that you've met along the way, they go a long way to shaping you. And of course, the education that you receive, both formal and informal. All those things come together to form the career person that you are and to shape the career path that you're on. And for us to talk about how we move from being successful in a current career, what leads to obsolescence, and what we can do to avoid that, these are the things that we bring into the picture. Now, what constitutes a career trajectory? Now, this has been put in place just to give you some things to think about. It's like we take it from the beginning. What was the career launch? For many of you, it occurred the moment that you graduated from college or graduated from high school. You had an informal diploma, marched off the stage and into a career, or I'll say into a job, which at some point in time became a career. However that process started for you, you had to start somewhere, but that's your launching point. That's when you're on this particular path, this trajectory that's going to, in many ways, begin to shape who you are on this career path. And along the way, depending on what organization that you're working in, there is this investment in your development. The organization makes an investment in your development. You make investments in your development. You begin to learn skills and acquire knowledge. Begin to learn to understand how the culture within an organization works. You begin to make decisions about your relative stay within that organization. Is this a place where you want to spend a long-term career? Is this a place where you're here to kind of gather careers, gather skills, or is this a place that's going to allow you to begin to think broadly about other things that you want to do? And then somewhere along the way, you begin to really think about your career advancement. By career advancement, I mean the formal process of moving from employee to coordinator or to supervisor or to manager. Thus, that's the formal advancement that occurs within most organizations, and it contributes a lot to the skill development of your careers. It also contributes a lot to the knowledge of your careers. But it's not just limited to that. But it's at that point around career advancement that the research seems to suggest that more often than not, we become very comfortable with where we are in terms of that career advancement process, almost to the point where we run the risk of reaching what we call a career plateau. Now, a career plateau doesn't necessarily mean that something negative is about to happen, but when you start paying attention to the signals around you, it does suggest that maybe you have reached a point in your career where you need to really start thinking about what's the next set of skills, what's the next thing that I need to do, what are the networks that I need to become part of in order to move off this plateau and move back into the notion of being on a good career path. And typically, most people who recognize they're at that point, they begin career exploration. And by that I mean they may look at what are some of the broader opportunities that are available with them in their career path. And for a number of folks, it means looking at a completely different career altogether. That career plateau, the self-awareness around what's going on, we'll spend some time talking about the symptoms that we typically don't recognize that leads to that career obsolescence. Now, career obsolescence doesn't mean that's the end game if you are aware of the fact that you are on that path. It also can lead back to career exploration to where you're much more career-minded. And for the duration of what we're going to do today, We're going to talk about what happens when you're in that obsolescence mindset and the skill set, and what are some of the things that can launch you back into career exploration.
All right, so I think we're going to move into our next poll here, and those of you who have been on the session may have noticed I opened that a little bit early so that you can get started with that poll. But what we'd like to do is ask you, where are you on the career trajectory? And if you could take a moment and select all that apply, select any that apply there. If you think you're just at that career launch phase, if you're perhaps moving into development and developing your skills, if you're looking at advancement, perhaps exploration is something you're looking at in mind. Career-minded, you work because you want to, not because you have to. Maybe you feel like you're at that plateau, or you're maybe a bit wary that you might be reaching that obsolescence phase. And again, the poll here is just to help us kind of gauge your level of participation, and we would invite you, if you're open to participating in the poll, to take a moment to do so now. And I'm going to go ahead and close that poll off, and then we're going to share these results with Dr. Meadows. And Lee, why don't you go ahead and take it from here?
Okay, thanks for participating in the poll. And one of the things that stands out to me right from the beginning is the fact that about half of you are in that career exploration mode. You're seeking some kind of job change, and that makes a lot of sense for the kinds of things that we talk about here at Walsh, some of the things we've seen trending in the business world, and a lot of the conversations and research that we've looked at. But also there's a stronger percentage of you who are seeking advancement, and it's a kind of advancement where you're looking at not just some kind of job promotion, but something that's going to make a difference in terms of your career path. So about 80% of you are really sensing that there has to be some kind of movement, either a different job or something within the job. Now that says a lot about what's going on from a career path standpoint. So that kind of that need to move, that restlessness, and I'll call it self-awareness about that I need to be doing something different, either developing my skills to add value or to seek some kind of change. That says a lot about what's going on. Now we've got a smaller percentage of you who are kind of just at the beginning, but that's okay, because this is the kind of webinar that's designed to give you information about things you need to think about as you move toward development and some kind of advancement. So let's start talking about movement then. All right, career obsolescence is generally defined as the degree to which employees lack the up-to-date knowledge and or skills necessary to maintain effective performance in either their current or future roles. Sometimes it's ineffectiveness results from the application of knowledge and skills should be attributed to obsolescence. Now, we offer that definition as something formal in which to think about. But what it typically means, ladies and gentlemen, is that the skills that got you to where you are and allowed you to be successful in what you were doing are not the skills that are going to continue to move you forward. They're not the skills that are going to continue to advance your efforts. They're not the skills that are necessary to be that's going to make your performance any better. It doesn't mean that it's any worse. It means that it's time to really start thinking about, how do I upgrade to keep myself relevant? I made the reference that it's a way of thinking about how do you have dial-up skills in a digital world. Well, that means that there has to be some awareness, some thinking, some paying attention to the things that are going on around you, so as not, so as not to find yourself in obsolescence mode. And it doesn't matter that you have a certain set of skills. If those skills can't be applied toward the productivity and advancement of what an organization is trying to accomplish, then it creates a whole different mindset for how we go about the process. So that's how it's defined in general. Let's talk about some things specifically now. We're going to try and address the question of what happened, from a self-awareness standpoint. What happened? How did you find yourself in a career obsolescence mindset?
Okay, so I think we might have the next poll here too, and this kind of relates a little bit to the topic. What are signs that you see that would indicate that an individual is less engaged at work? And we've opened up that poll now. And if you could please select all that apply. Do you think it's, not seeking promotions? Perhaps it's doing the bare minimum to get by. Maybe you see people starting to disappear around you, finding other opportunities. Perhaps it's, not networking. Maybe you think it's all of the above. So again, these polls are just designed to kind of keep you engaged throughout the presentation today. If you could please take a moment to participate in that poll, and then we're going to go ahead and share those results off, and then Lee will talk to you a bit about the results. A reminder for those of you who are joining us a bit late that we are all participants will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. We will be doing Q&A in about the last 10 minutes of the session, and you can submit your questions through chat, and then we'll read those off to Lee, and we'll do Q&A in about the last 5 to 10 minutes of today's webinar. So I'm going to go ahead now and share the results with the audience, and then Lee, once you see those on screen, you can take us back from here.
Well, we have a lot of smart people out there. That's reflective of what happens here at Walsh and the relationship that goes with that. And most of you got it. It is all of the above, ladies and gentlemen. When you find yourself less engaged in work, these are some of the things that we see from a behavioral standpoint. The notion of not seeking promotions. You do the bare minimum to get by. And people do disappear around you. Now there's an assumption that comes with number C, in that more often than not, people disappear around you because the organization might be downsizing or resizing. Downsizing and resizing, restructuring, that in many ways may not have anything to do with obsolescence. Those are two different things. People have been downsized with relevant skills, but the role that they're serving in that organization is no longer needed. Whereas individuals can experience career obsolescence and in many ways move themselves out of an organization by not keeping up. You're not networking, you should always be networking. That's one of the hallmarks of staying actively involved in one's career. So all of the above do apply, and let's talk about some of the specifics around that now. Two factors contribute to obsolescence. Technology has been a primary mover and driver and shaker and motivator around the notion of trying to stay abreast of what goes on, how technology is used inside of organizations. And technology has indeed been a major contributing factor to any number of individuals who find themselves moving toward obsolescence because the technology is moving them in that direction. Let me say this, technology is not a real person. It's an event, it's a series of activities, it's a different way of doing something to achieve the same results. So in many ways, if there's a resistance to technology as part of your career path, then in many ways you are pretty much signing the document that says, I no longer want to do this kind of work because the technology has advanced beyond me. What we do know is that technology, like running in a race, like learning how to swim, like learning how to cook a good meal, is just a question of knowing how to adapt to that technology and then apply that technology in the workplace so that your skills continue. The second thing, of course, is talent. And we spend a lot of time around here talking about the supply and demand for talent. The fact that there's a greater demand for talent out in the workplace than the supply can respond to. What that means is that you spend a lot of time continuing to hone your skills, and then we're talking about specifically the behavioral skills that support the talent that you bring. But if you're not using your talent, if you're not adapting to technology, then you're clearly on the path to obsolescence. So let's talk about the first symptom that puts you on the path to career obsolescence. Symptom 1, and we call that self-maturation. All that I need to know, I know. All right, let's start there. The longer you stay in your career, the more successful that you are in your career, there's a greater tendency to think that everything that I need to know about the profession that I'm in, retail, computer science, logistics, material handling, procurement, I have been successful. I've worked this job for 10 years now. There's nothing new and different about it. All that I need to know, I know, so I am confident, comfortable, and capable in my role. And so you convince yourself that because you're experiencing that linear progression of success, that all that's going on within the discipline, all that's going on within the field, there's nothing else that you need to know. So the question becomes, what else is there? What else are some of the things I need to know in terms of supply chain? What else has changed? What else is different? It's fundamentally the same process, right? Well, yeah, to some degree. However, technology has a lot to do with what goes on the supply chain just as much as it has to do in retailing. The online experience has changed a whole bunch of things in terms of how we access knowledge and information. So the way we go about acquiring knowledge is real different. So all that you need to know, no, that's not true. And because that's not true, oftentimes we slide into a process of convincing ourselves with symptom 1 of self-maturation that there's nothing else going on that I need to know so I can stay comfortable within my own knowledge base, knowing that what I know, I will continue to know, and that things won't change that much. So with this particular symptom, here's some of the things that we see. You are comfortable in stagnation. Now, that may sound contradictory, but it really isn't. The life inside of the cube becomes comfortable. The relationship that you have around you are very comfortable. The people that you talk with are very comfortable. The process and the way you engage around the workplace is very comfortable. It can be so comfortable that in many ways it creates this form of stagnation in which there is a comfort for which you don't recognize, that you think that that's the norm. There's a focus to draw in new information, and as the internet continues to explode, as more information becomes available, you have to be able to take in new information about the things that you know so well, if something was becoming routine, is because you're not accessing other additional information that's going to help you continue to advance in your career. The longer that you are in a particular role in an organization, it tends to foster this false sense of entitlement. So I have been in this role for 20 years. No one knows this role better than me. I have made the sacrifices. I have done I've fought the good fight. I've done all those things that are necessary to ensure that my time in this role has been worthwhile. That entitles me to certain benefits. Well, no, not really. And it never has. It creates this false sense of I don't have to work as hard because I put in the years to get me to this particular point. And that for others is just a question of waiting for retirement. And for a number of folks, waiting for retirement can be a 10-year wait. I mean, we've encountered any number of folks along the way who say, well, I'm just trying to get to retirement. Well, how old are you? I'm 45. When is retirement? 65. Well, wait a minute. Isn't there something wrong with those numbers? Or I'm 55 and I'm waiting 10 years. But while you're waiting to try to get to retirement, your productivity may be questionable. And what oftentimes we don't understand is sometimes the behavior around these symptoms becomes so observable and so recognizable that people begin to respond to that. So we want you to remain consistently aware of this whole notion of convincing yourself that you know all there is to know and you've done all the things that you need to do. So let's talk about the second symptom, avoidance of risk. Let's look at what those symptoms look like. When you spend a lot of time in an organization and become comfortable, one of the things that becomes, I guess, such a paramount issue is the tendency from moving in your youthful days when you were happy to take risks to becoming a lot more comfortable in your stagnation and avoiding risk. And by avoiding risk, I'm talking about reasonable risk that comes from trying to implement ideas, reasonable risk that comes with trying to take on new product designs, reasonable risk that comes with trying to restructure things so that it responds very, very positively to what customers are doing. You don't want to do anything that creates notice for you, and in doing so, you avoid the risk that comes with that. Well, let's look at some of the things that you need to think about in terms of the avoidance of risk. One of the things that happens is you find comfort in repetition. And so as long as a process or a set of steps or a set of activities repeats itself within a particular cycle, there's comfort in that because there's a whole level of predictability that comes with knowing that in January this happens, but in March this happens, and in May this happens, and it's been like that for a number of years within your career. There's also this reluctance to move beyond established patterns, and what that means is that the routine is much more comfortable for you. That you have you get real comfortable with knowing how these patterns work in your workplace. You know, they also add to the predictability of who does what when. It also gives you the opportunity to, in many ways, do that thing that a lot of us do when we spend so much time driving a certain route to work every day that we don't begin to think about the route. We can zone out while we're driving, and when we come out of that zone, the next thing we know, we're there. They're time-tested, things that are time-tested for similar activities and outcomes. We did it this way once, we did it again, we got the same outcome, we did it again, we got the same outcome. And then this last one of waiting to be asked or directed. In other words, not taking the initiative to pursue ideas, not taking the opportunity to not seek permission for something, but to ask for forgiveness. Organizations have opportunities in abundance, both around the cube and around the organization, and take great pride in those individuals who are willing to take some initiative around issues that need to be solved. It's been my experience that anytime someone has taken on a problem and solved it and presented the results to whether the manager or the supervisor or to the organization, then more often than not, the organization is grateful that it happened. Okay, let's look at the next one. How about this notion of being underutilized? Let's see here. Remember that point in time in your career when it seemed like you were always being asked to do something, when you were typically being sought out for advice or counsel, when your expertise around a particular brand, product, or product that the idea was sought out? Well, let's look at some of the symptoms that come from underutilization. One of the things that happens is you find comfort in what we call low energy output. It doesn't require a lot of thinking. It doesn't require a lot of mental energy. It doesn't require a lot of time. It doesn't require you to have to do much. Consequently, when you are operating in terms of a low energy, you're not at your creative best. And when you're not at your creative best, that means ideas don't flow as quickly and as often as they should. One of the other things that happens, and we always find this particularly interesting, is that there's a reluctance to be noticed again. It's like you've established yourself. You know, you are recognized. People know who you are, and they know who you are by the things that you accomplished in the past. And so you are recognized for those things that were accomplished in the past. And so it creates this reluctance to want to try to do something different because there was security and recognition in those things that you previously accomplished. So you build a reputation around those things that happened in the past. You've gotten recognition based on those things that happened in the past. And so there's a reluctance to roll that ball again because the risk that comes with that at this point in time in your career may seem just too risky. The notion that time is the wedge between inactivity and activity. What we mean by that is that oftentimes we will do something, have that activity accomplished, and then find ourselves being inactive, but trying to give the impression that we are active. And what I mean by that is that it's very easy to do what we call look busy. And looking busy oftentimes is a direct result of inactivity around the elements of your job description and the goals that the organization is trying to accomplish. So you look like you're doing something, but you're really not. And anytime you can separate the amount of inactivity from when you do something, it makes that time when you do something seem like it is occurring more often, and it really isn't. There's also this waiting for your utility to be sought. In other words, you want people to come seek you out for information, to seek you out for advice, to seek you out for concerns or issues, and you're not being sought. No one's seeking you out as often or as frequently as they once did. You're not being asked the questions that you used to be asked when you were in meetings. Your input is being sought on some of the things that they once were sought on. So that means that in time you are being utilized in the way that made your career path. All right, let's look at this next symptom. And this one of limited influence. And I'm going to show you these elements of limited influence so we can begin to get some understanding about what that means. When early on in our career, when you take an initiative and meet the right folks and networking and connecting in ways that are important to your career, those connections and your expertise converge at that point called influence. And that is the ability to influence decisions, influence behavior, to be able to influence certain kinds of outcomes based on your expertise and your networking and connecting with folks both within the organization and outside the organization. Now, so the broader your network, the greater your influence. But here's one of the things that starts to happen inside of the organization around this fourth symptom. And that is you start to find comfort in established relationships. And at some point in time when Brenda and I have put together the 1-hour webinar on working with millennials, one of the things that we will talk about is this notion of how we go about establishing relationships. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times from individuals who complain about the fact that I don't know how to connect with this particular group. And so what they do is they stay within their own group. All right, so they stay within that same group of folks with whom they go golfing. They stay within that same group of folks with whom they go out and have lunch. They stay within that same group and they seek those same folks who, when they involved in some kind of project or team activity, those are the ones that they seek out constantly, consistently, frequently, so much so that they add depth to the established relationships so that it's comfortable, but they don't broaden their relationships to see what other kinds, in what other areas can they be influential. And when you're no longer doing that, the world is changing around you. Information is changing around you. Skills are changing around you. And you, in the comfort of your established relationships, may be hanging around, connecting with individuals who are also comfortable in those established relationships. So what that means is you influence one another, but you have no influence around the other areas. And the other side of that coin, of course, is there's a reluctance to engage in other relationships, to seek out other groups within the organization or outside of the organization, to spend time within other functions, building relationships within those functions, to spend time in doing cross-discipline, to do all those things that are necessary to meet and establish yourself with other individuals who could benefit from your expertise. But in order for that expertise to be valid, it has to be constantly updated. And time provides memory of past accomplishments. We love talking about the things we did in the past, and oftentimes we hold those up in the highest regard as one way of distinguishing ourselves from other individuals. And those things do make sense, ladies and gentlemen. They make a lot of sense. But keep in mind, they are past accomplishments. You did it back then. What are you doing now to add to having a past accomplishment in present day? And so the memory of what you accomplished, then the longer amount of time from that accomplishment, then time tends to embellish that particular memory. So what you want are current memories created from current accomplishments. And then there's other symptom of waiting for your interaction sphere to expand. In other words, I'm not going to seek out other relationships. I'm going to let those relationships seek me out. But again, if the expertise, you may have the expertise, but if you haven't spent the time building the relationships, then what tends to happen is that you spend more time waiting for folks to seek you out as opposed to you taking the initiative and seeking out the relationships. Okay, so let's talk about our next symptom, poor communication. And we debated whether or not this should be number 1 or number 5. So we'll just talk about it as a symptom because the issue of poor communication in any organization rarely goes away at any particular level. But in this case, it has a specific bearing on what happens or how it contributes to the notion of obsolescence. So let's start looking at some of the symptoms. And let's examine what happens here. All right, one of the most interesting signs that we have made note of or trended around lately is this notion of being comfortable with email being your emissary. And by that, you speak through emails, not through face-to-face. And this is an issue that goes on irrespective of the level. So it doesn't mean if you're at the beginning of your career or the middle part of your career, even toward the end of it. If you are relying on technology to be the emissary around the things that you communicate, then you are losing the opportunity to be influential in relationships. You're losing the opportunity to have your ideas and your thoughts known by others within the organization. You also lose the opportunity to be in touch with some of the issues and concerns of your colleagues inside of the organization. So rather than send out a long email and to make that a frequent part of how you communicate, the issue becomes one more of using email to address specific items, but using your own initiative to be the primary communicator for the things that you want people to know. There's also this reluctance to bring up relevant issues. Interesting things are starting to happen within the organization. Interesting things are happening in the external environment that impact what goes on in the organization. And the tendency is to ignore those issues, or at the very least, don't bring them up as discussion points. When those particular issues, the depth of discussion that occurs around those issues will typically give you some insights about some of the things that you need to be concerned about, some of the skill areas that you need to develop, some of the knowledge that you need to acquire. So just because it's an issue, and it might be an uncomfortable issue, but within that discomfort is the opportunity to sharpen one's knowledge around that issue so as to be of service to the organization in ways that helps it solve that issue, if you will. Another one of the symptoms, time favors technology and you don't. There's a lot of us who would just love to have push-button telephones again. There's a lot of us who would love to bring back 8 tracks. And there are any of us who would love to probably drive a Model T. Well, those things aren't going to happen because technology barely stands still. And so by standing on the shore of the beach and watching this wave of come your direction called technology, you're telling it to halt, doesn't stop it. But it does allow you to get overwhelmed by it. Don't run from technology, ladies and gentlemen. And one of the things I've learned is don't be ashamed of the fact that younger people are a little more adept to technology than you are. I've also found out that for the most part, they are equally willing to teach and to share how that technology works so as to help you remain updated on what goes on. Now, I still haven't mastered the ability to send a text message without looking at the keyboard. My son can do that. He's been trying to teach me that skill, and I'm going to learn that skill, My concern is once I learn that skill, you won't need a keyboard at all, you just need to think about it. But at least I'm in the process of learning. So technology doesn't play favorites. All it does is try to make things better. The other symptom is waiting for these communication patterns to converge. And what I mean by that is you wait for individuals from both an email standpoint, from a text standpoint, and from a meeting standpoint. You wait for all these things to come together at a particular point in your career so as to allow you to use whatever influence or expertise you have to respond to that. Well, waiting for communication patterns to converge that's a meaningless effort. Email is going to be what it is. Texting is going to be what it is. They are all means to an end. But none of them ever replace the ability to communicate one-on-one, to communicate within a group in a way that conveys the message so that you're completely understood. And none of these pieces can ever take away from your own specific communication pattern. When individuals stop communicating with you, when they stop responding to your emails, when they stop sending you emails, when there's a reluctance to have you in conversations about new things that are going on, if there's a reluctance for individuals to not talk to you about the new technology that's about to happen or how changes are going on in the organization, that's a symptom that some communication issues are going on that are essentially getting in the way of your ability to grow. Now, I've talked about all this from the point of view of the individual. Let me talk about how the organization observes the behavior that's oftentimes described as obsolescence. One of the things that organizations tend to do is that they look at this notion of initiative, and where individuals might say that, well, I take initiative around certain things. Initiative is only part of the picture. The remaining part of that picture has to do with implementation. So to round it out, you might be demonstrating good initiative-taking behavior. But if you're not the kind of person who can get things implemented, you've only done half the job. You only got only a part of what's going on. Self-development is leadership. And for those of you who don't invest in your own development, wait for the organization to figure it out. Wait for the organization to do something for you. Wait for the organization to suggest this or suggest that. The organization looks at that and goes, so not only are you not taking enough initiative around certain things, but you're not also looking at how you can develop your own set of skills to help us achieve our particular goals. This is a classic, but it happens all the time. You don't bring up a problem, solve a problem. You solve the problem, give the report about how the problem was solved and what's the benefit to the organization. That keeps you alert, that keeps your expertise strong, that shows that you do more than just take initiative, but you also make things happen. Now, the organization wants you to stand out due to your accomplishments, because that's in many ways the final measure, not the acknowledgments that come from people who said you did a good job. Those are secondary. So you can spend a lot of time having your closed, established network of folks who give acknowledgments about the things that you do or the wonderful person that you are. But the organization says, well, but what is the stuff that you've accomplished? Because for them, that becomes the final measure. We like acknowledgments, but acknowledgments without accomplishments means absolutely nothing. The organization also recognizes that consistency is measured across different activities, not the same repetitive activity. So if you're very, very good at keeping meeting notes, and you keep meeting notes better than anybody else on the planet, and you do that consistently, yes, the organization says, well, thank you for doing that, but there are other activities that occur in which that same level of consistency is not only required, it's mandated. So don't fall into the notion of having only a specific functional way of getting a certain repetitive thing done, because you do that consistently well. You're also trying to figure out, well, what's the consistency around other activities that I can bring into this particular process. And ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't have to be a lot of activities, but some measurable activities that say that you do more than just keep good meeting notes. Okay, so from there, let's talk about some other things that the organization thinks about. Self-preservation often conflicts with organizational preservation. What does that mean? That means you spend more time looking out for yourself than you do what the organization is trying to accomplish. And organizations are big places, they're small places, a lot of things happen in those places, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea that when you make decisions that reflect your own ability to stay within a job or within a particular function, that oftentimes the organization may see that as conflicting with what the organization is trying to do to preserve itself. Also, the organization knows that there's rarely anything wrong with not asking. That oftentimes the signal that you are too comfortable within a particular function or expertise is that you don't spend time asking the questions that are necessary to advance some kind of initiative. Understand this, all behavior is malleable. You can adjust, you can adapt to anything. Oftentimes we just think we can. It's the mindset around the change that's fixed. That if you decide that you can't do something, that you're unwilling to do something, that you don't want to do something, that's exactly what's going to happen. So that in the end, the organization will always say, it's up to you. If you want to move out of this, if you want to move away from this plateau and get back into the point where you're exploring, that's up to you. Whatever support the organization provides, it's still essentially up to you and what you want to do with the process. So here's some things to think about. Let's talk about how we move from obsolescence to opportunity. Here's one way. Find something dormant and bring it to life. There's always hanging fruit. There's always loopholes. There's always things in the organization that it wishes it could take care of, but it doesn't have the time. These are the kinds of opportunities that it's not that anyone doesn't want to get them done. It's just they feel like they haven't had the time to get them done. So find something like that, remove it, take it away from being dormant and bring it to life. Find out why it was dormant in the first place. Maybe it was dormant because it wasn't the right time for it. So maybe it's an opportunity to do something with it now. Always focus on ways to implement ideas. Don't just stop at initiation. Take the initiative, embrace the idea, figure out how it's going to work, and then get the idea implemented so that it continues to make a difference. Learn to be an informal mentor to a new staff member. New staff members, they bring in fresh information. They bring in fresh insights. They're the ones who get a chance to ask the fresh questions around things like, why do we do something a certain way? But the opportunity to be able to share your expertise, to share your insights in an informal manner is a way of also loosening up your thinking around some of the things that you do. I always tell a lot of our alumni students who want to go into teaching, and they ask, well, what's some of the things that makes teaching interesting? I say, well, one of the things that makes it interesting is when I have an opportunity to talk out loud about something that I'm thinking, it gives me some new insights on it. Well, being an informal mentor can do that same thing for you. You can master an area that will make you an internal consultant to the organization. So take your expertise and broaden it. Find out where the organization has a gap and go fill that gap. Learn something that's that says to the organization, yeah, I've got this one expertise, but here's some other things that I'm learning, and here's how it is, and here's how it's going to be helpful to what we're trying to accomplish. Take an online webinar in your knowledge area. Do not fall into this whole notion of I know what I know, what I know, what I know. There's always things going on, and if the issue is I don't have time to get out or anything like that, Walsh College has webinars for you. There are webinars all over the place. Feel free to take some of those. Make time to meet with colleagues in your field, but who work in other organizations. Some of the best conversations I have, besides with my colleagues here at Walsh who teach, but also with other individuals who teach in other organizations. We get to share insights and expertise. We share common stories, but I'm always finding some things that I can learn. Find ways to connect your employer to the surrounding community. Sometimes the idea of going outside of the organization, there's a need that goes on in the community and connecting the organization in that way is another way of building your communication skills and also building your ability to help work with others. Take 5 minutes each day to read something you didn't know. We know the internet is chock full of information about all kinds of things. 5 minutes a day, each day to read something you didn't know. You'll be surprised how your mind begins to converge that information in ways that allows for new ideas. Be clear about your intent and make it known. Don't assume that the organization knows what you're trying to accomplish. Make sure someone knows that. And don't be afraid to attend a conference that's peripherally related to your field. You might be working in marketing, but conferences around communications may give you some insights about things that will help you in marketing and vice versa. So there's a number of things that can happen to make these things much more palatable for you. And there's all kinds of resources. Networking events are all over the place. Let me just send a shout out to the Detroit Chamber of Commerce. They do a number of monthly activities around topics and networking. Professional associations, if you haven't joined one, join one. Go to some of their local conferences and meet some folks who are doing some things. Also attend industry conferences. It's never too late to learn something new, and believe me, there's always something new going on in your profession. Find educational institutions that you want to attend. If you're putting that off, don't put it off any longer, because there's things you can learn in the classroom from others who are sitting there with you or who are online with you and give you some unique insights. Local libraries are just abundant with information. So let me send a shout out to the library network and all the library directors that I get a chance to work with. Go to your library, talk, tell them about some things that you're interested in. They're more than happy to help direct you in areas that are just going to make you better. And I got to send a shout out to Toastmasters. If nothing, Toastmasters does a wonderful job of helping you to improve your communication skills in ways that you hadn't thought about. And it's a free service. All the individuals who are there to learn how to be much more self-confident in the presentation of who they are. So there's a few ideas out there that I think will prove to be real helpful.
All right, thank you, Dan. We're just now going to go into Q&A, and we have had that final poll open here for a little while. I think most of you have had the opportunity. But if you'd like any more information from Walsh, information on future career branding events or webinars on our degree programs, I know that many of you are students or alumni, but if you're interested in perhaps certificate programs or anything else, let us know, and we'll be happy to help you out. If perhaps you are employed and looking at information about how to recruit Walsh students or alumni for your organization, a lot of the students that are learning these techniques from Lee and keeping current on their careers, and if you're looking to add to your staff, do let us know. We can help you out with that. Or if you are a student or alumni, if you'd like some help from our Career Services Department, let us know, and we'd be happy to connect you with those individuals. So at this point, we're moving into our final phase of the webinar, and that is our Q&A. And this is your point to ask Lee any questions that you may have about the whole topic of career obsolescence, about the topic of career branding. So while we're waiting for any of those questions to come in, we'd just like to remind you that all participants are in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. And if you do have any questions, please let us know, and we'll read those off to Lee. So I'm going to just open this up now, Lee, and I know we usually get a few questions about the slides, and we certainly will share some of those slides with you. So we'll make sure that we'll be able to get a copy to you in the next few days. So Lee, I'm going to ask a question as we're waiting for questions to come in here. And you mentioned earlier about being clear about your intent and making it known. So yes, there are some in the area of career branding that feel that if I do a good job, they will recognize me and they will promote me. So are you saying we shouldn't just wait around for that to happen? I mean, talk a little bit more about, is there a generational divide on that? The younger generation, they're going to tell you, versus maybe the more mature generation is going to wait for that opportunity.
So the waiting for the opportunity is a direct result of how organizations used to be and the stability that came with that. And that if you did your job, if you did a good job, there are more than enough opportunities in the middle of the organization for you to be promoted, and somebody would recognize. The do your job, that represents that whole humble value that we all have, and it definitely still needs to be maintained. But in today's environment, fast-paced, technology-driven, things are always on the move. It's not safe to assume that that hard work alone is going to be the final recognition. I think you do have to spend some time letting people know who you are, what's your intent, and what is it that you'd like to learn while you are there. But if for no other reason, it at least holds the people who are responsible for your supervision or something like that, it holds them accountable. And it engages them in the process. So it's not just this annual performance review thing that traditionally occurs in that setting, but it's one of, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, this is what I want to do, how can you help me get there?
So let me ask you this, Lee. Some people are very humble. They don't want to say to their boss, hey, I want to be promoted. They want their boss to say, I recognize your work and I want to promote you. So what recommendations do you have for those individuals who are maybe a bit uneasy about making their intentions known?
Well, but you can make your intentions known by saying, you know, I'm very happy with this organization. I like the fact that I'm able to do certain kinds of things, and I look forward to the opportunities that are presented based on the things that I'm able to accomplish in this organization. And, you know, unless you just need to be hit in the head with a baseball bat, I think that's pretty evident to anyone listening that, one, you're taking pride in your work, two, you like being where you are, you want to be there if the opportunities present themselves.
Excellent, thank you. And we do have another question that came in. How best can one bring awareness to an achievement or an idea which was used by another without the recognition? So it sounds like somebody may be taking credit for another idea.
That typically happens all the time. Well, let me start off by saying this. Anytime you have an idea about something, write it down. Document it somewhere. You know, get it timed. You know, get a time that it's documented, et cetera, et cetera. That's for moving forward. The other thing that you can do when you've had an idea and someone is getting recognized for it, I think it's important in that setting when that comes up to say something like, well, you know, that sounds a lot like the idea you and I talked about, Brenda, when we were having lunch the other day around or lunch around this particular, or however it occurred. I think it is important for, if someone is taking recognition for an idea that was yours, and it's being done publicly, then I think it's important that publicly there's a way of saying that so that you send a message to the people who are hearing it, as well as the person who stole the idea, that, yeah, I'm aware of this, but let's make absolutely certain that where the idea came from, and say, well, I don't remember having a conversation. Sure you did. Let me show you. Let me pull up my calendar from my phone and show you where we had that conversation 2 weeks ago, or something like that. That doesn't go away, but from this point forward, if you're sharing that idea out in the open, take out your cell phone and take out your notes and write in that note that you were talking about this idea at this time in this particular setting, so that if it does come around, you at least can be able to say to someone, well, here's the proof that we talked about it at that point.
Great, thank you, Lee. And I think we're just about out of time here, so we'll stay on the line for just a few more moments here online, I should say. Someone did bring to the attention that we had some typing, and I do apologize. I think our microphone was a bit sensitive today, and while we were trying to load some of those chat questions here, we'll definitely make that adjustment. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I did want to point out we do have some additional webinars that are coming up, and we have October 4th, we're doing a next webinar in our career branding series, and that is a session on LinkedIn for career changers and job seekers, and that's being brought to you by Tracy Morgan in our Career Services Department. So we do encourage you to visit the Walsh College web series page to register for that session. And I guess we're just about in wrap-up mode here, so before I turn it over to Lee for final comments, I would just like to thank all of you for joining us today, and we do hope the information was helpful. And we'd love to hear your feedback. If it was beneficial to you, please do let us know by sending us some final comments here in chat. And with that, Lee, I'll just turn it over to you for any final comments before we close.
Well, let me say this. I applaud all of you who took the time to take this particular seminar or this particular webinar, because the topic is a little bit fearful. I mean, it does suggest that, you know, that my usefulness or my utility as an employee might be coming to an end. Let me say that that is not the case. And the intent behind this webinar is to give you the things to think about, to recognize the symptoms so that you can avoid career obsolescence and keep your career in both an exploration and advancement mode. So thanks for moving past the fear to be here to enjoy this webinar.
Great, thank you, Lee. And on behalf of all of us again, thank you for joining us, and we wish you a wonderful afternoon. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.